All right. Well, I want to thank everybody for arriving and joining us tonight for a screening of this fabulous movie called Uninvited, The Spread of Invasive Species. It's a documentary that was put together by the DEC, Department of Environmental Conservation. And a number of us are members of the town of Newcastle's Conservation Board, which is a town board whose mission is to work with the town community members on issues relating to conservation of the trees, natural environment. So we are very delighted to be able to host this movie and movie night, Zoom movie tonight with all of you. I just want to introduce you to our three panelists that we're going to be who will be speaking at the end. And we'll have a panel discussion on this, and we'll be able to open it up for questions from the audience. The three people I'd like to introduce are Jackie O'Brien, who is the leader of our Vine Squad and a very active community member. I don't know if people are waving. So Jackie, if you could just wave there. We have Jack Waynan, who is our student member. He is both a student member of the town of Newcastle's Conservation Board, as well as a Greeley student and the president chair of the Greeley Club that's known as Walk for Nature. And he's going to be one of our panelists. And we also have Melanie Smith, who is our also town of Newcastle Conservation Board, as well as a former president of the Garden Club, and again, another very involved community member. And we also, I just want to point out, we've got a couple other people to note. We have Dennis Corelli, who's our town environmental coordinator. So he's with us tonight as well. So thank you, Dennis. I just want to point out a couple things before we start that, the town of Newcastle has already started to work on this this issue about invasives in our plant environment. And Jackie O'Brien, who'll talk about this with the Vine Squad, again with Jack, we've already started some of these programs here. So you'll learn more about what those are. But, I feel like we're at least starting to address this. And hopefully, we'll have more and more of these things coming as time goes on. You probably have heard about the Jean Craighead George Park, which was a project that was worked on by the Vine Squad and many other dedicated community volunteers. And that's just one example of how we can transform our natural spaces. I'll be watching the chat, but we'll hold questions, obviously, about the movie till the end, but you can feel free to put things in there. And then at the end, again, as I said, we'll have a panel discussion and then open it up for general questions. So with us today, we have Jackie O'Brien, Jack Waynard, and Melanie. Where's Melanie? Questions. We have a few words from each of our panelists today, and then we'll have some questions. So Jackie, would you like to talk a little bit about the Vine Squad and why it was started, what it does, and how the program works?
Thank you, Lucille. Thanks everybody for coming to share the energy of trying to do something about this. So the Vine Squad was a initiative kind of barely off the ground, started just before COVID hit, and it is sort of in its limbo space of trying to just be something before. Well, I don't know how much impact we've had so far, but I have high hopes that it's going to gain some momentum. The Vine Squad is our town's version of many Westchester initiatives to get residents out, giving them agency, let them take action to increase awareness. So while we might be discouraged about the point of point of no return, tipping point, past the point of mitigation, there is tremendous need for people to have agency in dealing with environmental crises. And this is one of the ways in which people can get their boots on the ground, take their loppers, and go free a tree. So we took a lot of our kind of basic ideas from the Groundwork Hudson group that has for decades done free a tree days on the sawmill. Free a tree meaning you go and you cut vines that are choking trees, and you've got one tree now that is no longer impeded by whether it's any of the major invasives. So that's the basic notion for the Newcastle Vine Squad. This past December or January, or maybe it was the spring, we decided to try to do something instead of doing nothing with COVID by giving people an option to sign up for something called a stewardship spot, which allowed, instead of having big events like Groundwork Hudson does, and many other towns on the river towns do, we felt maybe some of our public Newcastle spaces could be managed to try to at least deter some new growth in some very visible areas. And Jack Winan's going to talk a lot more about that. So folks, we have about 12 individual people who have signed up for spaces kind of in Newcastle's public parks, but we also have Jennifer Bound's tremendous accomplishment of clearing an entire space and honoring Jean Craighead George with that new park that's going to be invasive free. And I'm sure she'll be eager to talk about that. I'm not sure if she's with us tonight, but anyhow, so that's in a nutshell, that's the Newcastle's attempt to get boots on the ground.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. Jack, do you want to talk about, I'm going to come back to you, Jack. Melanie, you have a background not only on the conservation board, but also in the garden club. Can you talk a little bit about how the average homeowner can look at their yard and sort of help manage these kinds of plants?
Right, I do. I think the first introduction, the concept of invasives can be a little surprising to people. I've had people who look at all the green and they say, well, it's so lush. All that's green is not good. Once you start looking more closely and identifying the invasive plants, you will see them everywhere because they are everywhere. So you can start. We have that great pamphlet that we had ordered the copies of, the plant invaders of the mid-Atlantic states. I thought that the program did a great job presenting that it's not just plants, it's also aquatic and insects. For the homeowner, I think we focus mainly on the plants. And so look at them and then monitor your own yard. It's really what Douglas Tellme was saying about responsibility. And then, as Jackie was saying, that we can move on to our public, our shared spaces as well. It's also incredibly gratifying. Lucille, I've been with you when we've spotted the Norway maple, go after them. It is a great form of exercise, one of the better times to go after a lot of the invasives during the winter months. And you're able to see clearly with the vines, and it is a way of extending a season of being outdoors with that.
Great, well, thank you, Melanie. And coming back to Jack, Jack, you have had some really interesting experiences with the Vine Squad and elsewhere. Talk a little bit about what you have seen and some of the things you've worked on.
Yeah, sure. So I joined the Vine Squad in, I want to say like May of 2021. And I started working with Jackie, who gave me a stewardship spot at Gedney Park. And I was managing mugwort. So a lot of people might not know what mugwort is, but you know it if you see it. And the weird thing about mugwort is that it goes through so many different like phases of its life cycle, and in each one it looks so different. So it's really even in more places than you think, and you might not even realize just because it looks so different. But I was managing a spot at Gedney. I don't know, you may have seen me if you were at Gedney Park over the summer. I had like one of those weed whackers, and I was like chopping the mugwort down kind of. But basically, it's so easy to manage a stewardship spot. Someone, I had a job over the summer, and it didn't take much time to just go there once a week, to kind of take an hour or two out of your day and just make sure that the species that you're taking care of is under control. Jackie's got so many great resources that she can send you to help with identification of these species, things like that, management. And it's also important to note that each different invasive species has a different, I guess, like form of management. So each one requires different care and different needs. So we can help you out with that if you choose to join the Vine Squad and help out. But it's a really great thing. Yeah.
Great, Jack. Thank you. And, I also want to say we've got members of the Conservation Board here tonight, and also Newcastle Healthy Yards and Newcastle Pollinator Pathways. So would you, Victoria, or Sue and Kent, would you, either of you guys like to just say a few words? Victoria, why don't you go first?
Sure. So this was great, by the way. Thank you so much for organizing this, and really excellent film, and great words by the folks who have spoken already. So yeah, just to say that Newcastle Healthy Yards is a grassroots community-based organization here in Newcastle. We have a Facebook page, Newcastle Healthy Yards, and our goal is to encourage people to, again, think of themselves as stewards of their own land, their own yards, to do things that are healthy. So planting native plants, not using pesticides, and trying to avoid leaf blowers, and removing invasives. So again, things to think about in your own yard that you can do to create a healthy ecosystem and support the environment.
Thank you, Victoria. Hey, about Sue, would you like to say a few words, or Ken? About pollinator pathways, just introduce it.
Pollinator pathways. We're doing everything that we can to get people to plant native plants in their yards. That also follows up with getting rid of the invasives if you have them. But it's really important for people to try. I mean, and do what they can. We've gotten some plants even at Gedney Park. The native plants and trees that were put in over the last couple of years. And if people can see what it looks like, and it would be very, very good to be able to get people involved.
That's great.
Well, one of the nice things, so pollinator pathways, their tenants are native plants and avoid pesticides and herbicides. And the town has committed to not using pesticides or herbicides in the parks. So all of the parks that we have are part of the pollinator pathway. And like with what Sue was talking about with Gedney, hundreds of native plants were introduced as planted as plugs there over this past year. And hopefully they'll become very fruitful, and they'll nourish our pollinators, etc. And again, also the Trees for Tribs planting, which I think was like 80 trees and some number of shrubs, is also going to help with our native our pollinators, etc. So that's
not besides the public spaces, also the school district are pesticide free. Do you guys have not to put you on the spot, but an estimate how many private properties have signed up for the pollinator pathway? What are you up to?
I think as far as private properties, it's somewhere around a little bit over 200. There's like a total, I'm just trying to work off the top of my head, so I'm not sure it's accurate. There's over 400 parcels in total. Obviously the town parks are a huge chunk of that because they're so large. But I think it amounts to something like 12% of the acreage of the town.
That's great. So we have more people can sign up for that, that would be awesome. And
Yep.
just while, since he's here, our fearless leader, Dennis Corelli, would you like to say anything, Dennis? Just for your impressions of the film and maybe, I don't know, something about what you've worked on, what we're working on.
I would say the one thing that I came away with, which I didn't reflect on until I think it was mentioned regarding purple loosestrife, and having done this for so long,
Yeah.
I do not see it as much
Yeah.
as I used to. I didn't even think about it, probably because you get so caught up in all the other invasive stuff that's in the landscape. So I just thought that was interesting. So what we're working on. So just the other day, there is required mitigation that the town has to do for the basketball court so many people enjoy at Town Hall. So we would like to restore Tertia Brook. So I just, it was funny, we just had our conservation board meeting, and I know I mentioned it because one of the attendees specifically mentioned all the porcelain berry and how discouraging that is, and how that's not a good impression for the town to be so close to the town hall. So I did meet with Ike, who's the park superintendent, and Bart Carey, who's commissioner of DPW. And their first impression when I, kind of introduced the first thing that we have to do was overwhelmed. I mean, there's a lot of, obviously embankment there that needs to just have like a first cutting of all that porcelain berry. And then when they looked at me and said, and this all has to be disposed of, I said, yes, it can't become part of the mulch piles at the DPW yard. So that kind of sent them scattering in terms of, well, do we have a brush hog? Do we need to rent one? We have some guys available. How are we going to do this? What if the hog slides down the embankment and into the brook? So I just bring that up not to discourage, but I do agree with there's certain things that need to sort of have an approach and a plan, because I too want to remove the invasives, but no, I don't want someone in a machine tumbling down,
Right,
to
of
the
course.
bottom of the brook. So we're trying to figure out, what we could do, and then maybe if there's potential for me to just, write up sort of a request for proposal and do it as a bid, to a private contractor, and where the money would come from, and that type of stuff as well. So it may not happen, in the immediate future, but it's on the list and it has to happen. So that's all I
Well,
guess enough to say.
That's Dennis, thank you so much. So that was very interesting. And I thought one of the things I came away with that from that the film was the chart that they showed that showed like the detection, like introduction, detection, and then how like quickly you get to like forget about it, right? So the things that we can do to keep it under control so it's still like feasible. I thought like that really, it behooves us all to identify those plants, like again, even if it's in our own yard, and manage it, because if we've got our 1 acre zoning, if you can manage that 1 acre, it won't spread further and further away. So I came away with that as a important takeaway. So there's a couple people who have there's a couple questions, and there's a couple hand raises. So I see, let's see, Jackie maybe? Yeah, Jackie.
So I just had a question about how the Westchester County municipality is dealing with these very same challenges, Dennis, about removal of non-compostable and non-mulchable material. And I'm sure this is something that's on their agenda, because so many of the great folks that are working with our county executive are some of the very same people that started some of these conservation initiatives, 20 years ago. So Dennis, do you have any knowledge of countywide, ways of grappling with disposal?
I do not. In fact, I've had some citizens of, that I would say have some knowledge in the area that have called me and said, I'm having trouble, or am I allowed to just throw this in a garbage bag and expect, sanitation crews to take this away because it really shouldn't be going in the, in the brown bags. And I said, yeah, I think that's the message that I agree with. But I think this particular resident, I think in moment literally had to drop the phone and say, hold on, I'm going to be right back. I got to go talk to the guys because they're looking to drive off and not take the stuff. And he was talking about sanitation workers. So to your point, they may be discussing it, but I'm not sure we're there yet in application. That I think if a sanitation worker looks into your black plastic bag and if they see nothing but salad, they may not take it, So
So it seems like there's an important piece of the planning that has to be really clear to residents, and maybe someone like Nikki Coddington at Westchester County level could help get some clear answers on that. Victoria, do you know Nikki?
Yes, I know her well.
I'm only asking because of your work with the Westchester Confederated Federated Conservationists of Westchester. Do you know Nikki Coddington?
I reached out to her. I know her well enough to reach out to her.
Mm-hmm.
Or if anyone else wants to. I think it's a really.
Your audio is a little.
I think it's an excellent point that you're raising, Jackie. So thank you for bringing this up. We should look into it and get back to the community around, what to do about this. So thank you for raising the point.
Right. So part of it too depends on the timing and what you're doing. And so as Jack was describing with the Artemisia, that the weed whacking with that works. You can, before stiltgrass goes to seed, you can at that point monitor with the seed and the berry, depending on the forms of the reproduction for the plant. So there is a way to minimize the amount of woody material that needs to be disposed of properly. But Jackie, you're absolutely right. Disposal, sometimes you can't time it. Sometimes you still need to monitor a site when you are going to have the viable seed and berries, and having clear guidelines on that can work. For homeowners, having a black contractor's bag that is where you put your horrible stuff is an option. It can, break down, but it is not going to be able to then be commingled with your regular compost or with other plant materials.
Wow. Okay. There was a question in the chat from, I'm sorry, from Leslie. Is Leslie still on? Do you want to explain? Would you like to ask your question, Leslie? If you're there. There you go.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you, Leslie.
Oh, okay. Thanks. I didn't know how to do it. So I have beech leaf disease, and I learned more about it than I'd ever want to know. Right now, it's taken over Ohio, but it's just starting in Westchester. That's the key time for everybody to immediately do prevention. And yet I was on chat groups with Cornell University. I spoke to every single top person, including McCann, who they named the nematode after McCanni in Ohio as part of my research. And then additionally, I spoke to Cornell University, the DEC person in charge, and all the tree people here. And then I was invited to join the chat for that Cornell University was doing with all the tree people. They invited me. And I also spoke to the USDA, which is also, they come out with warnings. Everybody was in agreement that people should keep their own leaves, branches, materials on their own lawns. This is a big thing that we have to get across to everybody, because there was one USDA warning saying this, and it was lost within the body of a document. And I spoke to the person who wrote it, and she said, well, that's just common sense. So the problem is, and this is what I wrote, there's no warning going out to municipalities and to the decision-making elected officials saying, stop collecting all the leaves and material from people. Tell them to take care of it on their own yards. But instead, they're composting it. And the problem with that is that they have proof now that many of the foliar nematodes, like the beech leaf disease, actually survive overwintering in the leaves, and they survive the heat of composting, even municipal composting. So what's happening is they're delivering this compost like these wonderful people, which they are because their heart's in the right place, but they're basically spreading the disease all over Westchester County. And that's probably, there's possibility, because the other thing is, and the other big issue is the arborists. When they come and they cut down the sick tree, they chip it, and then they deliver it to people's house to spread wood chips. I got a bunch of wood chips last year. I did that because I read that integrated pest management to control ticks in a way to do it without, harmful pesticides is 3 feet of wood chips or gravel bordering any area that goes next to a forest or, stone walls. Then all of a sudden I have beech leaf disease, and I had some other problems with my trees as well. I can't remember all the names, but all of a sudden all my trees have some problem after I did this. Every single one did not have this, now they do. And they did say, yes, what happens is when they were chipping the trees, there was a lot of leaf matter in the trees. You see a bunch of green chopped up as well. So this is a big thing too. And the arborists would be delighted if there was a law saying that they could not take the wood off of the property, because they're always looking for somebody who will take their wood chips. Unless some of the organizations are now composting it and they're selling it back to people after they've composted it, they probably wouldn't like that. But a lot of them don't have that set up. So if there was some sort of laws put into place where everybody had to keep their stuff on their yard, you would stop the spread of a lot of these invasives.
I don't even, Dennis, do you want to address, do you have a comment about that? I don't even know how to
Sure,
answer.
no, it's a good point. Well, first of all, it's funny because I had a woman call me recently who was doubting her tree removal people because she was insisting that they give her the wood. And he says, we are prevented from doing that. And I specifically asked and finally drilled down to, it was ash that they cut. And they were required to, however they were going to dispose of it. They could not give it back to her. And I think she wanted it specifically chipped. And they're like, no, if we chip it, we're going to have to take it. So I don't know about your situation of a year ago. I know,
Oh no, this is not a year ago. This is recent. A year ago, I got wood chips, but it might not have been from a tree that was identified as having the emerald ash borer. That might be a unique circumstance that they have to take. Same thing with the southern pine beetle. There's very specific things you have to do with certain things that are identified. But
right?
beech leaf disease right now, they don't.
Okay. So,
There's no rules with that.
I mean, my comment in general, because I know we were talking about this initially when they were talking about, sort of the removal and restoration of Jean Craighead Park. And there was a comment about, well, on my property, I was able to cover Pachysandra or whatever with 3 feet of wood chips. And eventually I was, they were able to, uh, sort of sequester that and then not have it grow. And I said, well, that's fine. But I said, there's a lot of wetlands on Jean Craighead Park. So that would be filling of wetlands. And 2, where are the wood chips coming from? And that could create its own host of problems. And obviously, in the firewood trade, my understanding is, if you buy that bundle of wood at the grocery store, it may have come from out of state, but it's supposed to be heat treated, for X amount of time at X number of degrees before it's allowed to be sold. So I think not just beech leaf disease and not just emerald ash borer, but it probably generally at this sort of, what do you want to call it, residential amateur level, it's probably not a good idea to engage in the exchange, trade, looking to sort of reuse wood chips from a tree or limbing that occurred, and you don't know its source. I mean, I hate to say everything has to be commercially sourced, but there should be some level of assurance that what they're producing is hopefully treated or taken care of to a standard before it could be just distributed to the public. Otherwise, to your point, it's a fait accompli and it's not going to work.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I just wanted to say, this is like, think about all the leaf collection that's about to happen. And then they're going to compost it and then they're going to redistribute it next year. And I spoke to a couple of municipal officials, nobody has spoken to them. And there's huge money for all these tree companies, quite honestly. It's thousands of dollars they make for experimental treatments for beech leaf disease. They inject the trees, which actually opens them to that's one of the treatments with emamectin benzoate, but it's not working. It's not working. So then they'll tell you, well, we're going to do smaller and more higher doses and this and that, but it's not working. But there's still
Yeah, I don't
all
think
this.
there is, not to interrupt you, but don't use the word treatment because that implies that there's an answer. There's not an answer right now.
Exactly. No, you're absolutely right. But they would say that's what they would say, and they can fool people. But some of them are more honest, and it's right up front in writing saying, we are not promising this is going to work. But if you do the research I did, it doesn't work. There's only a couple of things, but I won't bore you with the details that show some promising. But the biggest thing is to just keep your trees alive long enough through making, well, if anyone's interested, we could probably do a whole thing on that, but there's a few things you can do until they figure out how to solve it. But I think more to the point is, it's not just beech leaf disease, it's not just black knot and all the things that are attacking the pines right now, the southern pine beetle. There's also, I forgot the names of it, but some other things. Keep it on your yard. Don't spread it. And somehow this is the perfect group. You have to get that message to the municipal decision makers because they're going to just start collecting leaves soon and redistributing it next spring.
Yeah. Well, I was just thinking, we have oh God, I can't even talk tonight. I'm sorry. We try to tell people to leave the leaves, right? So if you leave the leaves on your lawn, that by definition, they're not going in a compost bin, but
Exactly.
most people don't do that. I mean, there's leaf bags all over the place right now. So,
But here's the problem. Like, and I actually don't tell anyone, but I paid off the garbage men to take mine away in black garbage bags. I gave them $80. But the thing, and I actually called the person in charge of highways and told him, but if you leave the leaves under the beech trees, the next spring, the nematodes that overwintered, and there was somebody out in Canada who did the test. She actually checked the leaves. They can overwinter in the leaves. They actually go into the buds of the tree, but a lot of them remain, and they use water to travel. Now you're going to have an increase on your beech tree. So what my plan is I might leave the beech leaves there over winter, but then say in the end of February, March, I'm going to start collecting them and putting them in black garbage bags just so that they cover the base of the tree. I might also do something else as well. That's one of my thoughts. But you can't leave foliar leaves that have foliar nematodes. You do have to get rid of them by spring or they are going to make the problem worse on your property. So the education has to be there too, I think.
well, thank you, Leslie. That was very scary. So any other questions? That there's nothing else in the chat. I just want to communicate that. Would anybody else like to ask any questions about invasives? Oh, Karen, I'm sorry. There you are. Please.
Yes, thanks, Lucille. I was wondering for homeowners that are on, if you suspect that you have, like, is there someone in the town that could come and tell you for certain you have, like, say, I think I might have one of those southern pine beetles, or I think from looking at whatever, is there someone in the town that can come and clarify that for you so you can then take action if you're not sure?
I would say from a liability standpoint, and I just ran into this with somebody who asked me what trees I should plant and what I should do. And I said, listen, I'm more than happy to advise, provide recommendations. But I said, if I start getting too much into, you need to do this, or getting into the care, if they don't live, then you can come back and say, well, Dennis said to plant this and said to water it this many times and said to whatever, and 3 of them died and the town should replace that. I'm going to answer similarly in that it would be me, obviously, and I'd be happy to go and take a look. I mean, obviously, ashes are the easiest at this point. But as far as for confirmation or level of infestation, or potentially, what to do to retard, ameliorate, stop, I would probably stop short and say you need to, probably hire someone, who's, arborist company who actually, treats and investigates this. But if people don't know where to go, or they're hesitant to call someone, at the beginning, and they just, sort of want a friendly ear, then, I'm willing to at least go that far.
Mhm. Okay,
Thank
and
you.
Jackie, you have another question? There you
Thank you. Yes, I had a question for Jack, actually. Sorry, Jack, to put you on the spot, but I'm very concerned about our generation, and I'll be very presumptuous and speak for the older bunch of us that are here on this wonderful Zoom gathering, and the sort of, great divide between our age and Jack's participation in this very, it's climate, it's a little bit climate crisis, a little bit not climate crisis, but it's in the mix with other issues that are sort of impending. And I'm curious to hear Jack's sense of what the awareness is among, sort of high school students on this topic, and how they either connect it or don't connect it to what I would see as Westchester County-wide climate crisis response efforts.
It's a great question. I think the thing about, I guess, younger people and kind of like my generation is that everyone loves to be activists, like everyone loves to be an activist. But the thing is, like, a lot of it's kind of performance activism and not so much actually taking action. And so a lot of people like to spread the word, but when it comes down to actually doing things, I find that people are reluctant to do so. They're more likely to do things like sign petitions, and they're more likely to, maybe retweet something or repost something to spread the word. But when you ask them to actually come out and help with something, they're more reluctant to do so. And so I guess I also think there's a lack of education, particularly around I guess conservation efforts for the younger generation. I feel like they care more about things kind of like you said, like climate change and things like that. And I don't think it's that they wouldn't care about conservation efforts. Like, I think that's something that people could definitely get behind. I just think that the word isn't really out there and the education isn't there. And so, like at school, I am the head of Walk for Nature Club, and we kind of do stuff to help with this. But I guess to kind of say like it's a club, it's optional. You don't really have to join. And so I think, if schools made conservation, I guess maybe education kind of like more of a mandatory thing, like maybe an assembly once in a while or something like that, I think that that would definitely help to spread education. But right now, it's kind of low. And I think that if it were to get up there, then people would start caring more and start taking more action. But as it stands now, it's just not the case, unfortunately.
Thank you, Jack. Any other questions, or does anybody have any other comments, or would like to add anything? Okay, well, thank you all. We are videotaping this, and we'll post it on our Facebook page. We'll post it on our webpage if we can. It'll definitely be on the Town of Newcastle Conservation Board's Facebook page. So I want to thank everybody for their time tonight. And stay tuned for more events and activities. And thank you to our panelists for your willingness to speak, and Dennis. All right.
Thanks, Lucy.
Thank
It was nice.
you.
Thanks all. Good night.
Okay, good night.
Thank you.